Most people who follow true crime know about the Delphi murders. When two young girls go on a trail in Indiana, they end up being part of a double homicide. Luckily, the girls were extremely smart and were able to get a video and audio clip of their attacker. Now, people across the globe are working to make sure these girls get the justice they deserve and to provide closure to the family. However, the perpetrator has still never been caught. Please listen in and share this video to spread the word about this case. It only takes one person to come forward and crack the case wide open. This is the Delphi murders.
Hello and welcome back to the Abyss Pod. I'm Brittany.
And I'm Hallie.
And we're so excited to have you back listening in. We hope that you've been doing well these past 2 weeks and everything's going great. And we hope that you enjoy this episode. We worked really hard on it. And it's a huge story that really needs more public attention and more eyes on it. So we hope that you will enjoy this episode and share it. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, our Facebook page, and definitely go subscribe on YouTube. We have a really good community of people on there commenting and talking about the cases, suggesting new cases, and things like that. So make sure to go subscribe there. Also, if you'd like to support the show a little bit more, we have a Patreon now. So if you'd like to give us a little monthly donation, that would really help us out and help bring you more content. And we've got a lot of exciting stuff in the works, so stay tuned for that.
Yeah, sometimes it's really hard balancing a job and the podcast. And so having just like that little bit of money on the side would help us really be able to devote more time to this podcast and bring you guys the content that we want to bring you.
As with all cases, we share images, videos, and all of our sources on our website, theabysspod.com. And this case in particular has a lot of images, videos, and audio clips. So this is one you're definitely going to want to go visit the website and get a visual on all of that and share it around, because this case is one of those that just takes the right person to speak up. So we want to get it to as many people as possible and spread the word as much as we can.
So let's jump into the abyss. Delphi is a very small, tight-knit community with roughly 3,000 people in Indiana. Abigail Williams, age 13, and Liberty Rose Lynn German, age 14, met a year prior in 7th grade at Delphi Community Middle School. They were both on the volleyball team and played the saxophone in band. They both admired law enforcement and they wanted to go into forensics to help them out. They had so much in common, and it led to the growth of a friendship. In fact, they became each other's best friend. In 8th grade, they planned on joining the softball team together, and they were really sharing in the excitement. Abigail Williams, also known as Abby, was very quiet in front of new people, but her shy personality was non-existent around her friends. She was raised by her mother, Anna, who supported her in all of her goals and interests. Abby loved to read and spend time outside and around animals. She was really artsy and loved to make crafts for her friends. She used her talent to make bracelets, paintings, and bead art. She also started to learn how to knit. Honestly, this sounds just like me as a kid. I love to make things for friends, and I'm sure Brittany can agree as well that she's the same way.
Oh, absolutely.
If you were to go into our little craft supply areas, we could probably have 10 different things that we just dove into at some point in time.
Definitely.
Liberty Rose Lynn German, also known as Libby, was very outgoing and loved to play in band class. She was described as kind and could easily spread happiness to others. Libby would leave post-it notes that were really sweet for her family and friends and teachers. She was raised by her grandparents since she was 3 years old, and her father lived with them. Her mother lived farther away, but she would contact Libby a lot. She was extremely close to her family, and Libby's science teacher even had a very strong impact on her. She grew Libby's passion for science and even made her want to become a science teacher along with forensics. Forensics played a part in her passions because she loved mysteries and she loved crime shows. She was also really into baking and crafting and participated in photography and athletics. So as you can tell by the personalities alone, Abby and Libby clearly had a ton in common. They loved other people. They were very giving, very kind, and they both were very into science and crafts, a lot of things that they could get on the same page with.
On February 13th, 2017, the girls were a little restless. They had had a day off from school because it was a makeup day for snow days, and they hadn't had that many that year, so they had a nice day off of school the day before Valentine's Day. And as girls do, they had a sleepover the night before. It was full of crafts and laughter, and they were really getting into their hobbies. So the following day, they kind of wanted to get out of the house. The weather was unseasonably warm, especially for Indiana in February, and Libby asked if they could go to the Monon Bridge to take some pictures and walk around. It was a popular trail, and some of their friends had been there earlier in the day. Libby was told that if she could find a ride there and a ride home, that they could go. So Libby's sister, Kelsey, agreed to take them there, and then the girls agreed to meet up with Libby's father, Derek, in a couple of hours to be picked up. Kelsey ran in, got jackets for the girls, fearing they would get cold out there, and then they headed off. Libby and Abby were dropped off at the trailhead on County Road 300 North. Although the bridge trail had been popular that day for hikers, it seemed like the girls were pretty much alone out there around 1:35 when they were dropped off. At 2:07 p.m., Libby posted a photo of Abby walking on the bridge to Snapchat, and she also posted another photo of just the bridge itself. Around 3:15 p.m., Libby's father, Derek, pulled up to the spot they agreed to meet at, but he did not see the girls, so he called Libby's phone. She didn't answer, so he tried several more times, thinking that they had lost track of time or were off wandering in the area, just having fun. But when Libby still did not answer, her father got a little bit concerned and started to call to family. No one was too alarmed at first, but when calls to Libby's phone started going straight to voicemail, several family members, including Kelsey, went out to look for the girls. They feared maybe one of the girls had been injured, or perhaps that they had fallen off the narrow bridge or something like that. But by 5:30, there was still no sign of them, so the family decided to get the police involved. Law enforcement was there within minutes, and a search ensued. Authorities were not at all concerned at first, thinking this was just typical teenage behavior. Maybe one of the girls had sustained an injury. That was kind of their worst case scenario at this point. Some police even went to friends of the girls and asked if they had seen them, thinking maybe the girls went back into town and they were hanging out with friends or boys, but nothing came of that. Around 11:45 p.m. that night, with nothing having been found, the official search was called off. On the HLN podcast Down the Hill, one of the officers stated that they just didn't have the equipment, such as spotlights and things like that, to continue an official search. Carrie Timmons, who was Libby's mother, said that she was really frustrated with this decision, that she wished that they had worked harder to search that night. Some members of the community continued to search through the night, though, but nothing turned up. Again, at this point, law enforcement thought the biggest worry was exposure to the elements. They had no idea what the following day had in store.
On Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2017, they decided to expand the search area. This expanded search would only last for a short period of time. Kelsey German heard someone ask about the shoes that the girls were wearing after they found a Nike shoe. At noon, just shortly after the shoe was discovered, searchers found the bodies of Abby and Libby after noticing a tie-dye shirt. They were located approximately half a mile east of the Monon High Bridge. Abby's mother was back in town due to the stress of the search when the pastor was able to contact her about what they had found. Luckily, an FBI agent happened to be in town visiting family and was able to help with the search. Police have kept many things under wraps, even their cause of death and how they were found. DNA was collected from the crime scene, but they have not released what kind of DNA or where it was.
Again, on the HLN podcast Down the Hill, Robert Ives, who was the county prosecutor at the time, he's now retired, said that it was an extremely odd crime scene. He said, quote, "It was just not your normal, a person was killed here crime scene," end quote. Without giving away details, he said there was some unusual evidence at the scene. He said this included at least 3 quote-unquote signatures, and he even said that if there were more murders, these could potentially come up again. But aside from these frustratingly cryptic statements like that, we really don't know much about the scene itself.
The day after their bodies were discovered, an autopsy confirmed that Abby and Libby were victims of a double homicide, but they refused to release any more details. An interesting side note that was brought to our attention is based on the obituaries of the girls. Libby's obituary stated that she died on the 13th, while Abby stated she died on the 14th. Some people speculated that Abby hadn't died immediately and that the family knew this information. However, the family just says that they wanted to put the day she went missing, while Abby's family wanted to put the day the girls were found. This seems pretty reasonable to me, and I would say to listen to what the family says and the police are saying, because we want to diminish any of the unsubstantiated rumors that may be inhibiting the case. The same day as their autopsies, the Indiana State Police put out an image of a man taken from one of the girls' phones. This photo is on our website for you to look at. We highly recommend taking a look because it only takes one person, like we have said, to recognize this man and provide a tip for the family to get closure. The man is wearing blue jeans and a navy jacket. He has reddish brown hair and is walking with his head down and his hands in his pockets. Police speculated at this time that the man was about 5'6" to 5'10" and roughly 180 to 220 pounds. At this point, the police were saying that they just wanted to talk to the man, see what he may know. However, the following day, on the 16th of February, they stated that the man in the photo is the prime suspect for this double homicide. Around this time, police also searched a home that was on Bicycle Road. It was stated that this was based on evidence and tips, but that's all we really know about the search. The police were very secretive about what information they had versus what they didn't have. They kept so much under wraps. It's literally insane when you look at this case, how little we really know and how much has been released to the public. But getting a search warrant isn't really a simple task, so it makes you wonder what kind of information they had to be able to conduct this type of search. It also makes you wonder what kind of things they may have gotten out of it.
Several days later, police released a huge piece of evidence. It was revealed that the image captured of the man in the blue coat was actually from a video. From that video, they released to the public a very short audio clip. Initially, this clip was very muffled. It was speculated that Libby had slipped her phone into her pocket while recording to conceal it, which may have contributed to the poor quality of the audio. Police worked really hard to clean it up and release it in hopes that it would lead to the killer and have people just recognize it. This clip is just 3 words long, down the hill. We're going to play that for you now, and it'll repeat a few times so you can really get a good feel for it.
Down the hill, down the hill, down the hill, down the hill.
Personally, I find it pretty hard to know if it's someone even I've heard, but hopefully that connection that you have with like a family member or a best friend, when you just see them, you just know it's them. Like a gut instinct just knows that that's who that is. So hopefully someone who just heard that maybe got that gut instinct.
Yeah, and that's what the police are really hoping for, that someone just has that light bulb moment and they can say, I know who that is. During the press release, police also confirmed what most people suspected, that the video did indeed come from Libby's phone. The quick thinking with the video seemed to show that the girls were unnerved by the presence of the man, but friends of Libby said that she would sometimes take pictures of people to joke around later with her friends and her sister. So some friends think that maybe this was just joking around. It's really unknown if the girls were immediately afraid or just thought he was strange and creepy, but not imminently dangerous. The careful concealment and capture of the video suggests some level of fear to me, that they kind of knew something was off even if they didn't know that it was the level of danger that it actually was. The phrase down the hill has been thought to have been a command for the girls to go down a nearby hill to get away from potential onlookers. Their bodies were eventually found down a hill near a creek, so this phrase kind of correlates with the location that the girls were found in, and I think that's a big reason why they're pretty sure that this man was the killer. Police said they have a lot more information from the phone, but that they would not be releasing it at this time, which again is just frustrating to onlookers, but then also you understand that they just want to keep things close to the vest so they can really have a solid case when the time comes.
Also, the extra information that they have from the phone, rather that be from the video or whatever, we don't really know what that is. They may have the girl's murder. They may have it all on video or audio. They may just have some other reason to believe that this was the man, but we don't know what really is the reason they think that this guy is for sure the person, but they clearly have some type of indication.
Yeah, and there's some evidence that they got a lot more of the crime on recording than they're kind of releasing at this time. Indiana State Police Sergeant Kim Riley said at this same press conference, quote, "We want to keep the copycat people out. We don't want them coming in saying, well, I did it because I saw the video and this is how it was done. That is not going to be available to them. That information that is still on the video is in police information, and police are the only ones that are going to know about it," end quote. So that seems to really suggest that they have a good portion of the crime on video, and that there's more than one reason why they're not releasing it, whether it's to preserve evidence or just to not shock the public or give anybody ideas and things like that. It may be a leap on my part, but I think that statement in itself is very, very telling. Like you said, there's a lot more to that video than was released. And to say that copycats are worry seems like not only was a lot of the crime recorded, but that there were really unique elements to the crime. If that was a major reason they weren't releasing that, there would have to be something more than just your run-of-the-mill murder.
Yeah, I agree.
And again, whether this was a tactic used to lure the girls away from the trail or if it was the murder themselves, we really have no idea. Riley's statement does show that police know a lot of details from that video. And in this press conference, there were a lot of other statements that were kind of telling if you dissect them. Some of it may be kind of overthinking on these statements. You know, sometimes people just say stuff and don't have some huge deeper meaning. But with so little released on this case, I think a lot of people dive into every little piece that's given. Superintendent of the Indiana State Police, Doug Carter, asked a haunting question during this press conference. He said, quote, "Who's next?" End quote. And this really drives home that some law enforcement officers believe that this person is or will be a repeat offender. A different officer stated a few minutes later that there was no reason to believe that this offender was a serial killer and that no other crimes had been linked to this one. So this is kind of one of those examples where officers made kind of contradicting statements from other officers, or maybe they just have different views on what's going on, or things like that. It's just kind of contradictory. And it's kind of even part of a bigger flip-flop where in the initial press conference announcing the information that they had, the community was told to watch their children closely. And then later they were told that there was no reason to fear. And then they're told this person may be a repeat offender. And then they're told that there's no reason to believe that's true. So I feel like just the nature of an uncaught killer out there capable of brutally murdering 2 little girls would suggest that there is, in fact, some reason to be afraid. But I'm sure it was a really difficult time for the police and the community with many differing ideas on what the circumstances actually were and how to proceed. I know a lot of family and community members have stated that they became a lot more suspicious of one another, and there was probably a lot of ideas trying to be implemented about how to calm the public. It was stated many times that law enforcement believe that the killer is currently or was once a local, but during this conference they said they really didn't know one way or the other. This is another thing that some officers go back and forth with, but ultimately I think at this point most of them believe that it was someone that had a pretty good knowledge of the area. In the podcast Down the Hill, which I've mentioned a couple of times, you should definitely take a listen to that. They have a lot of great interviews with friends and family and law enforcement to give you a more personal look at the case and how it progressed. But anyway, in that podcast, one of the officers stated that the most memorable part of seeing and hearing the video that Libby captured was the feelings of the girls and how they had to know things that kids their age shouldn't have to know. There again, this seems to suggest that a significant portion of the crime was captured and had a lasting impact on those who had to view it. On March 9th, 2017, another press conference is held. During this, Libby's grandfather, Mike Patty, made a statement, and we're going to play that for you now so you can hear his plea in his own words and really kind of understand where the family was at this point and what they were feeling.
This horrible crime has torn a hole in our families that'll never heal. It's the small things that seem to hurt the most. It's just natural to holler for them to come to dinner or in the mornings to get up and get ready for school. Then expect them to come through the door after school. the silence when we don't hear their voice. Our girls were excited about the upcoming softball season. Just the day before all this happened, they had their equipment out playing catch, working on their batting in the backyard, going to the ball field with Anna to hone their skills for the upcoming season. But they'll never get to play a single inning again. There are too many ways to count how our lives will forever be impacted to share here today. I imagine most people listening that have raised or are raising children know how kids can be. A phrase that was jokingly attached to Libby and our family, from asking her to pick up her shoes, her school backpack, her coat, her first reply would almost always be, "I will, in a minute." We joked with her about this all the time. I believe if she were able to speak, she would ask people, please give her the 1 minute she always asked for, to really study the picture and listen to the audio clip. Someone out there knows this person or persons. He's someone's neighbor, coworker, family member, friend, husband, or acquaintance. If and when any new information is released by law enforcement, please take another minute from your day to review all the information and help us collect the pieces of this puzzle. Both of our families are requesting everyone to please help Abby and Libby.
The part about giving Libby the minute that she had always asked for is really heartbreaking. It's just another reminder that these were just kids that never had a chance to grow into the lives that they were meant for. It's also so frustrating because there's seemingly so much information that someone has to at least have an inkling of recognition, and yet no one has come forward at this point. The reward for information was up to $41,000. The community really pulled together during this time, and law enforcement did as well. Within the first month, 25 police agencies were working together on this case.
On March 17th, the police conducted a search via search warrant in the home of Ron Logan, which was the property where the girls' bodies were found. Police maintained that Ron Logan was not a suspect, and he himself maintained his innocence. Logan had some trouble in his past. He had been arrested only 6 days before the search for violating parole on an unrelated charge of driving on a suspended license the same day of the girls' disappearance. He had been on parole for a DUI he had obtained in 2014. Therefore, he was not home the day of the murders, and he had an alibi, and Ron Logan was cleared. He did make comments about the woods attracting deviants, and he thought someone in the victims' families did the horrendous act. Logan also said that the police spend too much time on people that had no involvement. Overall, Ron Logan is just a nice guy who had been through a lot. However, he had nothing to do with the girl's murder based on information from the police. He is getting a lot of the same treatment as Missy Bever's father-in-law. If you haven't listened to us discuss that case, you can go check it out. It was case number 20. But just to summarize, Ron Logan is being told that his stature and walk are distinctive and resemble the suspect in the video. However, the walk doesn't really say much. The police even said that the stature could match half of the men in the area. What it really comes down to are armchair sleuths seeing one thing and clinging to that, even if there is plenty of other evidence to say otherwise. Not that being an armchair sleuth is a bad thing. We've seen cases where this really benefits law enforcement and can help them solve a case, such as in the documentary Don't Fuck with Cats. But focus that energy in the right direction and back it up with official details about the case to make sure you're actually helping. The Indianapolis Colts players Pat McAfee and Jim Irsay donated $97,000 to the reward fund. They weren't the only ones to add huge donations either. The U.S. Representative Todd Rokita donated $9,000 as well. Big corporations started to get in on the action. Lowe's donated orange light bulbs to the community so that they could put it on their porches as a symbol of support for the case and anger that the suspect was still at large. Papa John's held a fundraiser as well to support the case, and they really added good publicity. By July 17th, 5 months after the double homicide, police had received about 18,000 tips. Furthermore, a composite sketch was released, which we have on our website, theabysspod.com. This sketch was created from 2 eyewitnesses who saw this man on the trails on the same day and about the same time that the girls were killed. There were many people who say they saw the man that day, but it is hard to really substantiate all of them.
On August 14th, 2017, a WTHR article stated that the police confirmed that they have a longer video, and while they had only released the down the hill snip thus far, they had played a bit more for the family. There were still a lot of things not even released to the families though, and a lot of them were thankful kind of for this lack of information. The article quotes police saying the girls were talking about quote unquote girl stuff, but did say something about a man they noticed behind them. In the investigation discovery show, Still a Mystery, Down the Hill, Abby's mother said that in the clip of the video, she saw Libby said something akin to, "The path ends here, we can't go any farther." But she didn't really expand on that as to the tone or anything. The families thought that with all the information, the sketch and the audio clips and just it being kind of a small town, that answers would come fast, but this was to no avail. As with most things, when a lot of information is withheld, there have been a lot of rumors about the unreleased audio, so it's really important again to remember that if a claim is not substantiated, that it should be taken with a grain of salt. I know there's a lot of people who have been kind of sharing information as if it's fact, or even saying, oh, I saw it in an article once, but then they couldn't produce the evidence for it. So we have to be really careful about that, because that kind of thing can really damage the case itself, but also really hurt the family. Police appealed to the public to send tips if someone they knew started acting strange after the date of the murders, or had changed their appearance, maybe they had canceled plans or left town, but not just to send in tips if they saw some random mugshot on the internet that vaguely resembled a sketch or something like that. They wanted real actionable tips that they could take and run with. The case was also featured on the Dr. Oz show around this time, which really helped boost attention. In February of 2019, Kelsey became a crusader for this case. She created a Twitter account at LibertyG_sister so she could connect with people and spread the word about her sister's story. She met other people that had lost family members to murder, and she even changed majors to biological forensics so she could help solve crime. I think that's a really special connection to her sister as well, because that's something that Libby was really interested in. Kelsey stated, quote, "I want to be the person that can get it done and relieve the pain from all the people that are suffering. I want to solve crimes because of what I'm going through, and I want to help people because of what I went through and what my family has been through," end quote. And that's just so amazing. She's given interviews to Crawlspace podcast and Kendall Ray on YouTube, I'm sure others, and she's really an incredible advocate for this case. In late April of 2019, police held another press conference in which they dropped kind of a bombshell, albeit not the one that everyone was hoping for. Police had stated a few days earlier that they had started down a new investigative path, and this conference was more or less an explanation to what that meant. A short clip of the suspect from Libby's video was released. This was just a few second clip of the suspect walking on this bridge, and law enforcement asked the community to look at the gait and the movements of the suspect, but they also explained that the unnatural gait of the man was partially explained due to the structure of the bridge. This bridge was an abandoned railroad, so it's constructed with railroad ties that are kind of spaced apart, and it's abandoned and pretty old, so due to its state of disrepair, some of the ties were rotten. So someone had to be kind of careful with how they walked on this bridge so they didn't fall or break an ankle or anything like that. So his kind of strange, so you can't really base this person's walk on what you see in the video, but still, like you said earlier, sometimes you just know when you see the movements of someone you know, or the mannerisms, things like that. The police also released a slightly longer clip of the down the hill statement, adding just one more word, guys. Superintendent Doug Carter gave a really heartfelt statement, and at one point he spoke directly to the killer, and we're going to play that now so you can really hear how passionate he was about this case.
Directly to the killer, who may be in this room. We believe you are hiding in plain sight. For more than 2 years, you never thought we would shift gears to a different investigative strategy, but we have. We likely have interviewed you or someone close to you. We know that this is about power to you, and you want to know what we know, and one day you will. A question to you. What will those closest to you think of when they find out that you brutally murdered 2 little girls, 2 children, Only a coward would do such a thing. We are confident that you have told someone what you have done, or at the very least, they know because of how different you are since the murders. We try so hard to understand how a person could do something like this to two children. I recently watched a movie called The Shack, and there's also a book that talks so well about evil, about death, and about eternity to the murderer. I believe you have just a little bit of a conscience left, and I can assure you that how you left them in that woods is not what they're experiencing today.
It's really heartwarming to hear stuff like that too, because so many times when police have to go through stuff like this, they go through these kind of cases pretty often, sadly. And so for them to really full-heartedly go into this case and to take it personally and want vengeance for this case is something that you don't always see and hear like you do right now.
Yeah, and we'll have this video on our website. I highly encourage you to go and check it out and hear the whole thing. It's about, I think, 11 minutes or so to hear the whole statement. You can really hear how hard he's taken this case and how frustrated he was that it hadn't been solved yet. It was a really intense statement, and I hope that it genuinely rattled the killer for him speaking directly to him, saying, like, we know that you're here. We've probably talked to you.
Yeah, when he said, like, you're probably in this room.
Like,
and we've probably talked to you or someone close to you. Like,
that's intense. And I hope that caused that person's stomach to just hit the ground.
It made my stomach hit the ground. I didn't even do it.
It also added some information to this case that was kind of interesting. Saying that they were, quote unquote, changing gears could be referring to several things that I'll get into in a minute, but that was pretty interesting that they're basically saying, you know, we've exhausted this first path and now we're switching over to a new thing, and they were really confident that that would lead them in a better direction. It's also confirmation that the police believe that it's someone in the community, even going so far to say that they had probably talked to him or someone that he knew previously, like we said. So that's a lot of information in that statement. In addition to these statements, police released a new sketch, and this sketch was completely different than the first one. It showed a clean-shaven man that looked much younger than the first one, and again, there's so many images, videos, audio clips, and links in this case that we'll have that all on our website, theabysspod.com, so go take a look at that. Even if you don't normally check out that kind of stuff, please just take a minute and view the video, look at the sketches, and hear the audio a few times. You never know if you have the key to unlock this case. The new sketch was said to be their new focus, and it had come from a compilation of witness statements. It had actually been created back at the time of the initial investigation, but had remained unreleased while the police followed other avenues. They said the old sketch was no longer the primary focus, although they did not elaborate as to why. Maybe they found that person, ruled them out. Maybe witness statements were deemed less reliable. Anything is possible. Law enforcement pleaded with the public to view the sketch, listen to the audio, and really try to figure out if it rings familiar. They again stated they believe this person is very familiar with the community and the area and may have lived there previously or may live there right now. In this press release, the police stated the sketches were definitively not the same person and that the man in the first sketch was no longer a person of interest. Again, why they reached that conclusion remains a mystery. They also stated that the man in this new sketch is the man from the video. So maybe the unreleased portion of the video shows a clearer picture. Maybe a disguise was used. Maybe witness statements had changed. We really don't know. Doug Carter even said later that the suspect was likely a combination of the two sketches, which is a little bit strange because they made a point of saying that these were not the same people in this press conference. So again, it's a little bit conflicting, but police are people. There could be error or miscommunication or things like that. During this conference, police also asked for information pertaining to an abandoned vehicle that was found off of the Hoosier Heartland Highway on the day of the murders. It was parked at the old CPS DCS welfare building on the east side of County Road 300 North between 12 and 5 p.m. Despite asking for information, police didn't release any information themselves about like the make or the model, the license plate number, anything like that. But clearly they thought that this might have some connection to the case. The reward at this time was up to $234,000. So they were really committed to trying to find any information to solve this case.
This current year, 2020, activity on the case is just as dominant as it was the day they went missing. Indiana State Police Detective Jerry Holman told reporters, quote, "We thought we were going to get the clues that we needed and be done with this in 4 or 5 days. We realized that this is a totally different type of investigation." End quote. Police have received about 50,000 tips and have interviewed more than 1,000 people. Some of the tips they received were able to solve at least 20 unrelated cases. That's amazing. The publicity has not faded out either. In fact, on April 1st, the case was featured on In Pursuit with John Walsh. The reward is now over $250,000. Police even stated that they feel like someone knows this man but is just keeping hush out of fear. There are some timelines online that are extremely detailed, but we really wanted to stay with information that had been verified by news coverage, police, or the families themselves. There is so much information on Facebook and Reddit where people talk about being in the area of the crime, but it's really hard to validate this information through those sources, especially with such a popular and well-known case. Needless to say, there's a lot more information other than what we have included that you can read up on if you'd like. If you find verified information that we didn't cover in this case, please feel free to share it to us, tag us, message us with it. We really want to know.
Yeah, there's so many rabbit holes that you can go down with this case. And like you said, there's so much conjecture, so much rumor. So I'm sure in a lot of those little paths down into the abyss that there's some good information there, but it's so hard to kind of uncover it with all the crazy theories and things like that.
Getting the facts out in this case is super vital to it being solved. So we would love all the support for this episode and help that we can to just make solving the case possible. Now, to kind of switch topics and jump over to law enforcement for a second, most people are supportive of the law enforcement throughout this case, but there are some critics out there. There are some statements that seem to go back and forth on information, which we've kind of discussed. And some people even believe that the police have not done enough and even fumbled the case. We are going to discuss a few of these weird instances with you guys, but understand that it's all speculative. Most cases come with mistakes, definitely under such high-pressured situations. To start off, the day that the girls were found, the police told parents in the area to keep children close by and to make sure to watch them, but then changed their statement 5 hours later. They stated that there was no immediate danger in the community and everything was fine. The first statement could have been seen as a broad statement, just kind of whenever something bad happens, you tell everyone, watch out, take precautions, lock your doors, that kind of thing. But then to turn around on the same day and say that there's not any immediate danger when you don't even know who it was or where they are or what the motive was, it just didn't sit well with a lot of people, and it kind of seemed to be jumping back and forth. Also, to even come out with that kind of statement when 2 girls just got murdered is kind of a strange thing to do. In another account, Sheriff Tobe Leesenby makes a comment that sounds suggestive of DNA being found at the scene and being fast-tracked. We even mentioned that DNA was found at the scene in the beginning. However, he then does a complete U-turn and says that he was talking about physical evidence in general and was not confirming or denying, even though he spoke directly in relation to DNA multiple times. So the fact that he's saying he wasn't confirming or denying, but he was talking about physical evidence, otherwise you would just deny it. He had to neither confirm or deny it. Just shows that there probably was some DNA and they're just another thing that the police are keeping under wraps.
Yeah, I think a lot of times in this case, one officer might say a little too much and then they're chastised for it and they're like, oh, I didn't mean that.
What, me? I didn't say that.
Backtracking a little bit to January 15th of 2018, Doug Carter went on Megyn Kelly Today and was briefly interviewed along with some of the family of Abby and Libby. I consider it to be a little bit of an odd interview, but again, it could just be chalked up to nervousness at being on national TV or just the tight-lipped nature of the case. He sidestepped some questions, and he even did that on some questions not directly pertaining to the facts of the case. Megyn asked him what young people could do if they found themselves in a similar situation to Abby and Libby. And he basically just said, be aware, but don't live in fear, and that evil lives among us, which is a strange answer to that question. He could have given good advice to kids that may have been in danger, but he just kind of made this weird, broad, unrelated statement, basically. Carter said in this interview that the perpetrator has likely killed before and will likely kill again. And this is in line with his own previous statements, but it also contradicts other law enforcement at times. And again, is the community supposed to be afraid or not? Saying there's an unnamed serial killer roaming around that committed a double homicide in broad daylight in a public park feels a little like saying that there's immediate danger, but maybe that's just me. Carter also said that there were no witnesses, which conflicts with the statements he would make the following year. This could come down to the witness to the crime versus witness to the suspect kind of semantics thing, or it could be a matter of information not being ready to be released. But I feel like a simple, can't discuss that at this time would go a longer way than saying definitively yes and then definitively no and backtracking, going back and forth, because I think that lessens the credibility of the police a little bit, and it's just confusing for the community and for people following this case. Witnesses had been brought up before this interview and would continue to come up after, so it was strange to deny that there were any at all. In regards to the video and the image of the suspect, Carter said that people should focus on the body and disregard the face. And again, this kind of leads me down the road where maybe a disguise was involved or something like that. He said, quote, disregard the face, but look at the body because anybody could identify a family member by looking at the body, end quote. This also kind of leads me to believe that police are not that confident in the sketch release being super accurate, but who knows. During this interview, Megan received word that the sheriff of a county in Tennessee called Bledsoe made a post about searching for the Delphi suspect there. And this led many people to believe that the search was being focused there, that they had basically found who it was or had a good idea of where this person was. Megan obviously asked Carter about this, and he seemed a little bit flustered. He said that he was keeping up with the situation, but that the search was national and not focused in any one area. And the sheriff in Tennessee backtracked and then made a similar statement about the search being national and not focused. So whether this was another case of bad intel based on internet rumors, a misinterpretation, or information that was not supposed to get out, we really don't know. Some people take these things to be bad police work or fumbling the investigation, but honestly, all of it could go either way. There's lots of agencies, officers, community, and family members involved. So it's natural for some information to get twisted up and some things to come out that weren't supposed to, people misspeaking, things like that, things getting taken out of context or just rumors, which is really a problem in this case. So I think it's pretty clear that the police are really dedicated to solving this case and working really hard on it. And I think that there have just been a lot of strange contradictions and stuff, but I'm sure that happens with a lot of cases, especially one so publicized and so mysterious.
It's hard too because there's so many rumors because they've been so secretive. If they would release more information, there would be less speculation to go around.
Definitely. People really want to fill in those gaps. This is a very intense crime and people want to see it solved and they want to help. They want to, be that missing piece of information. And with so much being withheld, there's just so much room for people to try to piece things together. So overall, I just think the backtracking, instead of being honest, made things worse in some places. And the lack of information, like we said, made the rumor mill run wild. There could be some mishandling of this case, but with what we know now, it doesn't really seem like it's for nefarious reasons or that the police don't care. We've definitely covered cases where the police just don't care at all or they intentionally mishandle cases, and we call that when we see it. So,
hint, hint, go check out Adnan if you want to know more about that.
Yeah, Adnan, Stephen Avery, Juan Rivera, even the Paul Skiba case is a case where they just didn't care at all. So there's definitely a lot of those out there, and we just didn't really see that with this case. Seems like the police are really trying to keep information under wraps, and that with so many different officers and agencies and things, it's just hard to kind of get one streamlined consensus of how to handle things. I think there's a fine line between withholding information crucial to building the case and just being dishonest with the public. I think certain people involved in this case don't really have a clear picture of where that line is, but again, I don't think it's for malicious reasons or a lack of care. I think it's just hard to get everyone to play ball, basically. Hopefully, all of this stuff going on behind the scenes is being handled in a way that will allow no room for doubt when the killer is caught.
Now we're going to get into some of the popular ideas in regards to suspects. The ones we'll be discussing are mostly internet rumors, and even sleuths with good intentions are capable of making unfounded accusations. So just keep this in mind while we discuss some of these possibilities. Also, keep in mind that none of these are set in stone. Police still need your help, so don't be misguided or believe that the police don't need your help if you have pertinent information for the case. Please go and report it. If they didn't need your help, they would have already gotten the perpetrator by now. But since they don't have them, every tip counts, so don't let this discourage you from stepping forward. Our first sleuth suspect is Jimmy Dale Duvall. Jimmy Duvall is a spitting image for the first sketch, but he looks nothing like the second sketch. He has been charged with sex crimes and weapons charges against an 11-year-old, which is another reason people speculate his involvement with this case. Also, he is posed as a cop and is believed to have been involved previously with similar charges. Another person that people mention as a sleuth suspect is John D. Miller. He confessed to raping and killing April Tinsley, who is also from Indiana. Our third sleuth suspect is a former pastor named Thomas Bruce. On November 19th, 2018, he held 3 girls at gunpoint and forced them into a supply closet. When one of them refused to listen to him, he killed her. Less than a month later, he was charged with 17 felony counts in relation to the attack. Thomas Bruce looked similar to the sketch. He also wore a brown flat cap and navy blue coat during the attack. Police looked into Thomas Bruce, but there was no definite connection that could be made. Some people still speculate, though, that he had something to do with the murder of Abby and Libby. Paul Etter is another person that people kind of targeted on the internet. He was wanted for sexual assault and kidnapping of a 26-year-old with a flat tire. After he assaulted and kidnapped her, he took her back to her car and just dropped her off. 5 days later, police found him in a stolen car, and he ended up committing suicide in a standoff with police on June 7th. Another person brought up online was Charles Eldridge. He was arrested for molesting a girl on January 8th, 2019 in Union City. He was caught because he went to meet a 13-year-old girl, but it was actually an undercover cop. Love it when they get them. He looked like the first sketch and even admitted to having sexual encounters with multiple children. Disgusting. He was also known to post graphic content on Facebook about missing children or murder, including information about the Delphi murders. Even though this seems really fishy, police suggest people not jump to conclusions. Once again, we have to really listen to law enforcement in this case because they know way more than we do, and we need to help them in any way possible to help the case conclude.
Another suspect that's gained some attention lately is Garrett Kurtz. There's a lot of information out there about him, a lot of rumors surrounding him as well, so it's definitely a rabbit hole you can fall down for a while. Garrett is a local that grew up around the area, and he even frequented Ron Logan's farm over the years and visited Ron's horses, things like that. He also had a sordid history with police. He had been charged with battery against his girlfriend, in addition to being a drug addict. In a very recent interview with a private investigator, Garrett said that he wished his ex-girlfriend would get hit by a car.
How lovely. What a nice person.
Yeah. On November 18th, 2019, Garrett murdered a young mother named Nicole Bowden. He strangled her to death, and police later arrested 2 other people associated with the crime as well, one being a man named Chris Mathis, who they found hiding under a woman's bed. Chris was arrested as an accomplice, and it came out that Garrett had strangled Nicole until she was unconscious. Then he used a cord to strangle her so hard that the cord snapped. During his trial for that murder, it also came out that Garrett may have been involved in the death of a man named Ray Hainish. Garrett said Ray's death was an accidental strangulation during sex, but Ray's family is very suspicious, and they're really trying to bring justice for Ray and hold Garrett accountable for his death. They have to wait until Garrett's first murder trial has concluded before they can really push this matter further. Garrett took a polygraph test regarding the Delphi murders, and by his own admission, he failed that polygraph. This made us think that maybe the search warrant at Ron's property was more about the people that frequented his property than Ron himself. Ron was well known to let people come on to his farm and visit with the horses and animals. Garrett's cell phone was said to have pinged in Delphi on the day of the murder, but we know that cell towers are shaky evidence. Delphi was a really small town, so you didn't have to actually be in Delphi for it to ping, but it's still kind of interesting. In the interview that I mentioned earlier, Garrett also brought up another local case in another town in Carroll County called Flora. And in Flora, 4 little girls aged 5 to 11 were murdered in a house fire that was determined to be arson. This case is still under investigation and not a whole lot of detail has been released yet, but it is super strange that in a county of only about 20,000 people, 6 young girls were murdered in 2 incidents in such a close period of time.
Our last person we're going to discuss is a man named Daniel J. Nation. At the time of the Delphi murders, he lived about 100 miles away, and he wasn't really a stand-up guy. He is a U.S. Marine from South Carolina, and he was stationed in Camp Lejeune and was charged with indecent exposure on 4 different occasions there, and once more in Spartanburg, South Carolina. In 2007, he was convicted of showing himself to multiple women and children. He was also caught masturbating while watching women in the gas station bathroom. In 2015, a former boss of Daniel's said that he would carry a machete and threaten her with it. In 2016, he was convicted of, quote, fondling the genitals of the defendant or another person in a public space, end quote. And he had also been convicted of domestic abuse. In May of 2016, he made a post on Facebook saying, quote, I am human, I have made mistakes, but I am not a bad person. I believe that God has sent his son to die for us on the cross, and I love what's left of my family, so I wish people would stop treating me like I am scum, end quote.
Cry me a river.
Honestly, after all that he did.
That's definition of scum.
Yeah. Don't go fondle people's genitals. It's wrong. Okay. So is beating your wife. Daniel also had many other charges involving drugs, driving on a suspended license, and failure to pay child support, which it just disgusts me to think of a man that has behaved in this type of way having children at home. It's just absurd. It should not happen.
Awful.
In April 2017, his wife filed for divorce, but then they just ended up getting back together. He was again arrested after several reports came in during September 2017 in Woodland Park, Colorado, about a man in a red Chevrolet Prism that was threatening people on a trail with a hatchet. To make it worse, you may ask, his family was also in the car, and he was driving with expired plates, and he had a warrant. He told police that he had a hatchet but wasn't threatening anyone with it. He was arrested with a weapons charge, and his wife was questioned as well. His wife had warrants out for her arrest since she had failed to appear in court, but the police released her since it was non-extraditable. Police believed that Daniel could have been responsible for shooting someone on the trail around the same time as the hatchet incident, but police would not release any details about this specifically. His wife talked to Fox 29 in regards to the Delphi murders and said, quote, honestly, I do not want to say that I can see him doing it or not, end quote. She also mentions not recalling what he did that day and that the clothes in the image were not things her husband would wear. However, she did say that there were similarities between him and the sketch. On January 5th, 2018, Daniel was sentenced to probation, and instead of being released, he was then transferred to Indiana authorities to be charged with failure to register as a sex offender on February 5th. On February 18th, 2018, police said that Daniel Nations was no longer a suspect. Doug Carter said, quote, we don't really care about him at this point, end quote. So maybe that's clearing him, maybe it's not. They just don't care about him, I guess.
Yeah, there again, that's rough because instead of definitively saying he has been cleared, you know, he's definitely not the person, just saying like, oh, we don't really care about him at this point. That doesn't mean anything to people. So I think a lot of people still cling to that as like a pretty good suspect because he hasn't
been completely written off.
Yeah. And they could have just said, he's definitely not the guy. He's not a suspect anymore. But to be kind of vague about it, I think has not done him any favors.
And as far as we know, not one of the sleuth specs that we discussed are currently considered a suspect by law enforcement.
The podcast My Favorite Murder just did an episode on this case, and there's episodes from Crawlspace, Case File, and various others, and this is one of those cases that just cannot get enough recognition until it's solved. One tip from the right person could break the case open, and it's so sure that someone, probably multiple people, know important information and just aren't sharing it.
This case is literally so close, you feel like you can just almost grab it. Like, we literally have a visual of the guy. We have him talking, and yet we can't figure out who he is. So it's just like a hair away from being solved.
The story just has to reach the right person, and that person needs to know that this is not going away, that it's not blowing over, and that's why it's so important for every podcast, everyone to be talking about this, and it needs to be constantly brought up so that people involved know that it's not something that's just going to blow over. Sooner or later, the truth will come out, and it's up to those that know helpful information which side of the story they want to be on. And I know we've said this several times in this episode, but we just want to stress again that it's vitally important not to just take little bits of information you hear and decide you know exactly what happened. Theorizing is one thing, trying to piece the puzzle together is fine, but people that put information out as if it's fact is really hurting the family and hurting the investigation. There's so many theories in this case, and discussing them can be so helpful in clarifying information and keeping the story alive, but there are lots of people online that think they full stop know what happened after seeing just like a side-by-side comparison of the sketch or hearing about one person of interest that has since been cleared and things like that.
Or even just like watching a documentary. Sometimes people will think that one thing they watched just gave them all the information they needed to know, but really, if you're going to start making accusations about the case, you want to make sure that you're doing it with substantiated facts.
And I know that there are a lot of YouTubers and a lot of people on like Reddit and Facebook groups that really want the case to be solved, but think that they know a lot more than what they actually do. And then they put out information, and then other people take that information as fact, and it's just a bad cycle. It does no good for anyone. It can cause law enforcement to have to allocate more time and resources to squashing poorly thought out rumors. It can also just flat out be super hard on the families to constantly hear these rumors and things that they know aren't true, especially when it pertains to the families themselves. I know that Libby's grandfather had been accused, and even the sheriff had been accused, and a lot of people like that. If you have a real tip that you genuinely think can help solve the case, definitely send it in, but don't just comment on videos and Facebook groups that you know who did it because you found a mugshot that vaguely looks like the sketch or something like that. And don't fight with other people about little bits of information that neither of you can substantiate. The families of Abby and Libby have had a hard time moving forward and healing from this, but they've tried to kind of do the best they can with this situation. To commemorate the girls, people across Indiana have put orange light bulbs on their porch and will continue to do so until the case is solved. A sportsplex and memorial park are underway to honor the girls. There will be 3 softball fields, batting cages, an amphitheater, and a playground. And you can visit abbyandlibbymemorialpark.com to learn more about this project and donate to help them out. We'll have that link on our website. Investigators are still actively trying to pursue leads and are very passionate about solving this case. They have this motto, "Today is the day," that they say after praying every morning, and there's still 5 or 6 people actively working on the case. New leads continue to come up to this day. Even recently, on August 30th, 2020, a woman called to report her ex-boyfriend for stalking and harassing her, and she said that he had confessed to the murders of the Delphi girls. Nothing has come of this lead yet, and we have seen other people confessing to murders just to instill fear into their victims, so it's really hard to say if this is a real lead, but things like that are still coming up to this day. The description of the suspect one more time: he's a white male, approximately 18 to 40 years old, but may appear younger than his age. He has reddish brown hair, between 5'6" and 5'10", about 180 to 200 pounds. He may live in Delphi or have lived there in the past. He may have changed his appearance or behavior shortly after February 14th, 2017. He may have even drastically changed his daily routine or started or escalated drug or alcohol use. He may have missed work or appointments around the time of the murders or canceled plans. And he may have even talked about the investigation. As the police said, they may have even talked to him, and he may try to ingratiate himself with that kind of stuff.
And it's also good to just remember, like, this happened on a holiday. We don't always get cases that happen on a day where things are done differently. So usually it's just some random day of the year and you're like, I don't even know what I did last week. How am I going to know that? But just think, like, what were you doing 3 years ago on Valentine's Day? Like, that is a very noticeable day that you're going to be doing something differently, rather it was hanging out with friends, rather it was going out with your significant other, or whatever you want to do. But it's something that you can definitely reference.
Yeah, and that's easy to kind of tell if a husband or boyfriend or father or neighbor or something like that started acting really strange, out of character. That's something that could definitely help this case. And any tips that you have, you can email the tip line. It's Abby and Libby tip@cacoshrf.com. They also have a tip line, 844-459-5786, or you can contact the Indiana State Police at 800-382-7537. And we'll have all of that on our website, so you can go take a look at that if you have any helpful information that you can send in. Again, we really ask that you share this, spread this story, look at the sketches, spread them around, do as much as you can to make sure everyone knows about this case.
Abby and Libby did all that they could that day to help capture their attacker on camera and on audio, and we just have to ask the question, is it enough? Will we finally capture the man who did this to those 2 young girls and stop him from doing it to another?
Thanks for jumping into the abyss with us.
Talk about journalism like lingo. Oh.
How frustrating.
How frustrated. Look at that dog. He's just running in circles. He won't stop. He's going crazy. You're closer than we were the first time, right?
Get me.